Welcome back to Rise and See. On July 4th, 2025, there were historic floods in the state of Texas. And today we're bringing on a survivor who is willing and able to share her story of how God brought her and her family out. I have with me, as always, my co host Joshua Carney, and our special guest today is Kasey Gilbert. Kacey, can you take us back to what life was before that moment on July 4th?
Sure. So we were going down for a family reunion on that was going to be on July 4th. So that was a Thursday evening. We arrived probably about 7 o'clock in the evening, and it was kind of, now looking back, it's kind of this eerie feeling because it was a calm before the storm. It was just a normal day. It was a beautiful evening. My parents had set up for this family reunion, and it was, so there's tables everywhere. It was beautiful, and the river was beautiful. Everything was just, I don't know how, I mean, it wasn't like there was anything that was going to happen that evening. So we actually checked the weather on our way down, and there was nothing, no indication of floods. There was some rain chances. I think it was like 25% chance, but nothing extreme, and there was no warnings or anything like that. Past a certain point on the road, we lose service. So about past Hunt, you kind of keep going back to our property, you don't get any service. And that's kind of actually a joy in it. It's cell phone free, and that's the beauty in going down there, is you just kind of get disconnected, and it's our happy place. So kind of a little history on the place. My mom grew up there. She has always talked about floods her whole life. Floods, this is where the floods have gone. And she said, you never want to be a part of one. They're scary. She remembers the 78 flood, the 87 flood. And she remembers where they topped out at. So anytime they built anything, they built above that point. So where we're located, there's a huge rock wall on one side, and then you kind of go up this big hill, and that's where we placed our cabin. And we actually just built that about 5-6 years ago. And the cabin was put on cinder blocks to raise it up even higher. And then there's a bathhouse, probably another 5 foot from it. And that's where there's the kitchen, a bathroom, and then there's a big pavilion. And then across the highway, Highway 39, there's a separate cabin, and that's where my parents stay. So that evening before we got there, and I even remember my niece and nephew, we brought fireworks, and we were so excited, and they wanted to pop them that night. And I remember my sister-in-law, she said, nope, we have to wait till July 4th. And if that's not a metaphor for do things now, don't wait till tomorrow, I don't know what is. But hindsight's 2020. We look at it and go, no, can't, y'all don't, play with fireworks. It's going to come tomorrow, but tomorrow's never promised, right? So we go to bed early. We put the kids to bed early because we knew the next day was going to be a big day. We had 100+ people that were supposed to show up. And about 1 o'clock, the storm started, and it was pouring rain. I mean, I've never been in a rainstorm. If you've ever been on the highway and had to stop because of rain, it was that times 10. It was buckets and buckets, and now you can look at the data and they tell how many billions of gallons of water have dumped, and they just got stuck above us. And I remember hearing the water from the river, but I didn't think anything of it. It was just like floods didn't cross your mind. So we just kind of slept through it. We kept waking up periodically. And in our cabin, it's just one big open cabin. So my kids were on kind of like, we kept them towards the back end. My son was in a little toddler bed, and my daughter is a year old. She turned a year old yesterday. So she was in a little crib. And we actually had an ocean sound machine on, and we had it loud because that's how they sleep. And so the sound of ocean waves was kind of covering up a lot of the sounds of the floodwaters. And I don't know if that was like maybe something that maybe we would have heard if we didn't have that going. But so basically, it's just poured down rain for, I want to say 2 hours. I mean, we just kind of kept waking up, and the thunder and lightning was so intense. I mean, the lightning strikes just kept hitting, and I actually kept thinking, gosh, if we just let up, I'm afraid that it's going to wake these kids up. And you know how it is with babies, it's like, don't wake them up. I was just so paranoid. But about 3 o'clock I woke up, and this is kind of the haunting part for me. But I woke up with knots in my stomach. And that's how I know it was different for me, because it wasn't just a normal time that I had woken up before. I knew something was wrong when I woke up. And so I had reached over, and I remember reaching over, and mind you, think about any time you've ever woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're not like really in the right headspace, right? I mean, it's just, you're in this like kind of dazed and confused, and you don't know what's going on. And as a typical wife and female, I guess, I just asked my husband to go check it out. So I reach over and I said, Reagan, I think it's flooding. And mind you, this is something that like, all I knew was that I had heard water, but I didn't really register it all. I mean, this is so unknown. So I reached over and I said, I think it's flooding. And that's like my first thing that I even said, and that's 2 seconds after waking up. So he hopped up, and I think he even said on his way over to flip on the lights, he said, I knew it. And he flipped on the lights, and then he said, we gotta go. And like, this is now real. It turned like my knots just all of a sudden became like, oh gosh, this is a for real thing. This isn't just, I mean, it just confirmed it. And now I have not seen it. I just am now hearing it. And now I'm hearing these rushing. I remember the waves smacking the side of my cabin. And I remember that sound. And it was just made things very real. Like, it made it very like, oh wow, my feelings were right. So I had I grabbed my phone and my watch and went over and stuffed them in my bag and put it across my shoulder. And then I just said, what do we do, to Reagan? And he said, just grab the kids. We don't have time. We got to go. And so he grabbed my son, and I remember turning to like get my daughter, and I had reached down, and I remember watching my hands tremble. And it was just kind of the first realization of, wow, I'm in like kind of shock, and like, we just have to go. We don't have time to freak out. So I grabbed my daughter, and by that time my husband had already opened the door and the water had started to come in. It was up on the porch, and we have to step down off of our porch to go down onto level ground. And so when we stepped down, we were stepping down into, we didn't know how fast the water was rushing. We didn't know anything, but you know, Reagan, he stepped out first, and he had my son, and we went about 10 foot up onto higher ground, and that was where the bathhouse is, and that's where we sat for a minute, just long enough to realize we weren't going to be safe there either. And at that point, we had set the kids, it's just from the 5 or 10 feet that we walked, we were soaking wet. The rain was still just pouring down. So my kids weren't even crying until we set them down on some towels. And we didn't know, like, okay, we had to assess the situation, what we needed to do to get out. And at that point, my husband was just making all the calls. I had done my job, which was wake up. And at that point, it's like he had been through a flood before. He was so calm. And he like knew all the answers. It's kind of insane. And we'll get into more of that later, but it really is just, he just knew exactly what to do and where to go and how to approach the situation. But I actually said, I don't have any milk for my daughter. So she's still on formula, and that's what she lives off of. And I said, you need to go back and get it. So he runs back into the cabin and he grabs her formula. And he said, he didn't have any shoes on. We both didn't have shoes on. We didn't have really anything. And he said he reached down to grab one of his shoes, and the whole cabin shifted. So it had started to bob at that point. And he said, forget the shoe. Things were falling off the walls. And so he just popped out, came back out with the formula. At that point, and this is minutes just after we got out, at that point he said, what was it? Kind of at like a little below our waist was now above his waist when he came back out the second time. And it was quickly approaching that building that we were in. So he basically said, we have to go. We got in my SUV, and I remember that quick little walk was, the lightning strikes were just all around us. I mean, just pop after pop, and it was so scary. It was just I think the lightning was scary, and my son, he was, trembling, and we were soaking wet. We got in the car and started to drive across the road, and we got up on Highway 39, which, it's up above the ditches. And he stopped. My husband stopped on the top of the road, and we were looking at the cabin that my parents were staying in. And he said, I don't think we can get across this ditch. I mean, just the water was just rushing down it. And I said, we don't have a choice. Like, I mean, the water was just gaining on us from behind us. The river was just rising. So I said, you just got to go for it. And so we went across that ditch. It got up onto the doors of the Tahoe, and he just floored it, and we went across, and it was silent. We opened those doors, and everyone is dead asleep. My niece and nephew were in the living room sleeping, and we walked in, and we were soaking wet. My kids are crying, and my mom comes out of her bedroom, and she goes, what's going on? And I said, it's flooding. And she said, do what? Like, it's where? And I said, Mom, it's flooding inside of our cabin. And she just couldn't wrap her head around it. For someone who's grown up there and who knows it, she still couldn't wrap her head around it. And she goes and wakes up my dad. My brother and sister-in-law came out of their bedroom, and they're in shock. They just couldn't even believe it either. And they put the kids in their bedroom, closed the door, let them sleep. And my dad woke up, and he said, I gotta go get my truck. And we said, no, don't go get your truck. Like, your truck's fine, let it go. But he was just determined to go get his truck. So him and Reagan go back over, and they get in my dad's truck, and my husband had grabbed his bag, which he had accidentally left in the bathhouse, which hadn't been flooded yet. So he went and grabbed that in his boots, and then he said, point the lights on the cabin that we were staying in. And when they were driving off, they pointed those lights, and they saw that cabin had lifted off and had started to turn into the floodwaters. And this is probably 10 minutes after we got out of it. So there was just, from that point, from the time of waking up to the time that they had got back with the truck, and then we sat there for 4 hours until the sun came up. We watched car after car after car go by. A lot of them, the alarms were going off. Some of them, the lights were just on. We are luckily up from Camp Mystic, and there really isn't a whole lot of people above us. So I'm reading stories about some people that had heard cries and screams and stuff like that. We were inside, so we never experienced any of that, thank God. It's traumatic enough, and now I couldn't even imagine people that are having to go through that. But until the sun came up, we didn't know the damage. The only thing we could see was that the cabin that we were staying in was gone. And then that the bathhouse that we had first evacuated to, it was just getting slammed by waves of floodwaters. And so if we would have stayed in there, we would have been in danger there too. So every move that and I say we, but God had provided to us was intentional, and it was the perfect timing. I want to say that God probably tried to wake me up through that night, and finally he told me at 3 a.m, there's no more time, it's time to get up. And there really was no time, it was minutes. So that was kind of the gist of the story. The next day was kind of normal. I don't remember ever even crying the next day. We just were trapped between the two water crossings. So there was no way to get out. The power pole that was giving us power had fallen about an hour after we had got over to the cabin. So we would have, if that had fallen any time before then, we wouldn't have been able to get over either. So, I mean, it was just so many things that it was like, if that wouldn't have happened, like, we would not have survived. So,
Kacey, that's an incredible story. You guys went through so much, but I want to capitalize on the fact that you followed your intuitions. That 3 o'clock wake up call was leading you away from a tragedy. So let's dive into the emotions that kind of played with you and your husband. You said that he took the role and said, "Hey, like, we're gonna be calm, cool, collected. We're gonna make it through it." What was your emotions like in that state, knowing that the waters were coming? You had no idea what was happening. You had to take care of your kids and just figure out what was the next move. What were those moments like for you?
Well, it was very, I don't think there was enough time to think. When you're put in a situation like that, there's just no time to overthink it. It was literally God just giving us the answers. I don't think I got set in until we were safe. Till we had gotten over into that other cabin and we were able to breathe and go, whoa, this just happened. That was when it all set in. But up until that point, we weren't really over scared. We just kept making the decisions to get out of there that I don't really know. I really just don't even know how we even knew how to do it. Like, I keep giving my husband the credit because I just sat there and I waited. I mean, if he would have said, hey, we need to stay in here, I think we'll be safe, I would have stayed in there. If he would have said, let's not try to get in the car, that's unsafe, I wouldn't have doubted his intuition. The emotions, they didn't come till later. So that's the weird part, is like you're not really in the moment. You're not really thinking, oh, I'm scared. It's just like, make a move. We have to learn to, like, we figure this out, how to survive.
Just for the listeners so they know, your cabin was about a mile up from Camp Mystic. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a mile from Camp Mystic and it's about a mile from River Inn. So it's in between the two, and there's a big straightaway and there's a big bunch of boots on the fence. So if anyone's ever traveling, they'll know that that's that area. And we're actually after a bend in the river, and it's very wide and it's very shallow typically. And like I said, we're typically 30 foot from the bottom of the river. That's how high our cabin was. So it wasn't like we were camping out on the riverbed or anything like that. We were in a safe zone. So that's the sad part about it was, and that's a lot of people, they felt like they were safe. Flooding wasn't even a consideration.
Yeah, and what was it? The river raised like 30 feet in 2 hours or something like that?
I mean, the statistics are different for every part of the river because they narrow and they widen and stuff. But where the water was hitting on our bathhouse and where we had to tear out some of the I guess the sheetrock and stuff in it already, and that was probably 40 foot from the. I mean, and that's just our spot. There are other places that maybe weren't as higher or higher. I don't really know. That's where it had gotten about maybe 38 to 40 foot above the bottom of the riverbed.
Just for some of the listeners that are listening, I think a lot of people have that question of why didn't these people get out? Why didn't they leave? But they had no warning. It was raining, but the amount of flooding that took place in that time and the amount of rain that hit, they didn't have time, and it was in the middle of the night. They just did not have a warning of it. That was a question that I've seen everywhere of, why didn't these people leave? Why didn't they evacuate? They didn't have a warning. If they did have a warning, they didn't have service, like you shared in the beginning. And so I did just want to kind of touch on that just for the listeners who are thinking, why didn't they leave? Well, they didn't have a
Right, and we
warning.
never got
So
a warning. A lot of people said that, we got warnings, so we never got them. We never got a single warning. Even my parents' place that across the highway, they have Wi-Fi. And so even when we went over there, there was no warnings. So we never got any kind of indication. And at that point, it was going to be too late anyways. With the no cell service, I know a lot of the Camp Mystic, those girls didn't have cell phones or anything. So I can't really speak for everybody else's situations. And, there's so many things now that say, why don't they put these alarm systems out? Well, this is miles and miles and miles. And you would literally have to put one at everybody's property because we have 14 acres. So, I mean, to hear that, unless it's this huge alarm system, I don't know how it all work. But it's easy for people to say, hindsight of a situation like this, that this is how it should have been handled. But this is a 1,000-year flood. This is not something that people were prepared for. So, and even if you are, you can't control it. You can't, I mean, I promise you, when I'm staying over there again, if it's raining, I'm going to higher ground. I'm going to be a little spooked up for a while, but I will say that it's never anything that ever crossed my mind because I would have never put my cabin there if knowing there was a possibility that my kids or me were going to be unsafe. That's kind of the thing that we've gotten a lot of heat for, was why would you put your cabin in somewhere that, was in a flood zone? It wasn't in a flood zone. It's not even the gauges that they say were busted out. They just couldn't even like hold the amount of water. So it was just a crazy, crazy situation.
I was actually on a family vacation in Rio Dosa that weekend, and we had been at the horse races that whole entire day, and we left probably about 3 or 4 from the horse races, and we got back in the truck, and I was scrolling through Facebook, and I started seeing all these breaking news and alerts and pictures and videos of what was happening down in the hill country, and my heart was just sinking. And most of it was the Camp Mystic girls, and my heart was just breaking. And then a little later on, I saw your story, and my heart sank, Kacey, because I didn't know how your story was going to end when I started reading it. And so I'm trying to read it as fast as I can, and I have tears, literally tears in my eyes, like praying while I'm reading, like, God, please let this turn out good. Please let this turn out good. And I finally get to the end of your story, and I just sat back, and I was just like, God, thank you. Well, God, thank you for waking them up and getting them out. My husband came back to the truck because we'd actually been fishing there, and he saw my tears, and he was like, "What's wrong?" And I told him, and it was just like heartbreaking. But to know that you woke up at 3 a.m., not from your own will, not your own power, I mean, like that, Kacey, that was the Holy Spirit getting y'all out. And as soon as I read that, I knew that that was the Holy Spirit waking you up to get your family out. And that, you told your story so great. Now I'm getting teary-eyed over here, but I just cannot tell you the amount of gratitude reading that and knowing that y'all were able to get out, but also putting myself in your situation. You have 2 little babies, and Waylon is, a little older than your son. I just cannot imagine waking my sleeping baby up and carrying them through rushing water to save our lives. And it's just, I think it goes to show, like, just the braveness that y'all had and the instincts to move on the Holy Spirit speaking, even though in that moment it may have not felt like the Holy Spirit. But I know now that you can probably look back and see that that was all God placing every step you had.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, Kacey, I just want to hop in here 1 second and just ask a question from our audience. So, what was the hardest thing you faced after the flood, and when did you know God's hand was on you, protecting you guys throughout it?
But the hardest was coming back home and seeing how bad it got. So that day, July 4th, we were trapped a whole day. There was no food, no water, no electricity, no way to get a hold of anybody, and our family back home were sick. Anybody that knew we were there, and they couldn't. Actually, my god sister called us in. She's an ex-game warden, and she called us in as missing persons because she couldn't get a hold of us. And we didn't get taken off that missing persons list. Y'all remember how it went from like 150 to 3? We were one of those. We were 10 of those people because we were not able to be found, get a hold of, or anything. It's kind of just it just makes everything more real. Sometimes when I think about it, I feel like it's just a story, but and I have to remind myself, I lived through that. That's crazy. But yeah, coming home was probably the hardest part. We didn't know how bad it was, except we knew we were watching the helicopters land across the big rock wall is Camp Mystic. And so we just kept watching them, and we knew, like, our hearts were sinking knowing that's the camp. Something happened. We didn't know, you don't know, you don't have any means of communication. And we had a neighbor who was lost and was later found deceased. And he actually was my grandpa's caretaker from like 25 years ago. And so those are little heartbreaking things that we'll always kind of have to live with. The little things that people don't realize that kind of sticks with you. But yeah, coming home, I had a little bit of PTSD from it.
Yeah.
I kept thinking, my hardest thing was shutting my mind off, because I kept reading these stories about these girls and these families, and It was so hard because we were just right there. We could have been that family. I couldn't have would have given my life for my kids. Anybody who's a parent would know, like, you're going to give anything. Like, I would have done anything to save them. You know, some of these stories where these parents can't save their kids, my heart breaks for them. And so my brain just kept going into these deep, dark places. And it was about a week of me just in this very low, and I couldn't get out of these holes. And there was actually one time, I think it was the night we got back, I just could not sleep. I couldn't sleep for weeks. And I had got up to go to the bathroom, and when I came back, I had stepped on our rug to get back into bed, and I thought it was wet. I don't know why, it was just like a trigger. And I hopped up on the bed real fast, and I had to tell myself, we're not there, we're not at the river, it's not like this is not wet. Like, it was just kind of something. And that, I think that was when I realized, like, ooh, I got to figure out a way to process all this. And it took me about 2.5 to 3 weeks. And I think once I decided to release my story publicly, that was kind of the thing that ended up helping. I thought it was going to be kind of helpful for me, but it seemed like it really was helpful for other people more so than me. The stories that I got from that post, survivor stories from people that were in Hurricane Harvey, were in mass shootings, all these people were commenting, people reaching out to me directly saying, please don't be guilty. Like, please don't ask questions. Why? You know, you are here for a reason. I needed to hear every last comment. Everybody who commented, I felt it. Like, I just felt it. And I think that's where it kind of was the turning point for me to go, okay, it's okay to be a survivor. It's okay to, like, be joyful and live life. I've kind of living this on borrowed time, kind of, almost, and it's okay. Like, it's okay to be happy with it. But that was the hardest part, was just coming back home and having to figure out how to live on this new life. It's just
Yeah,
been
I mean, that is definitely life changing and life shaping. But I do believe that in those seasons that we go through, those huge things that happen that are traumatizing in the moment, there's a bigger reason for it in the end. And you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to look back and see why God pulled y'all out, the purpose that is on your life and Reagan's life and your two precious babies. Like, there's a calling and a purpose that God's not done with you. He's not done with Reagan, and he's not done with your babies. And this is just the beginning of a big testimony that you're going to be able to wrap up and look back and see exactly why God walked y'all through those waters.
So I got a question for both of you two from the audience. It's a two-part question. So what did survival guilt look like for you? Like, was it physically, emotionally, or spiritually? And inside of that, was it hard to give thanks and appreciate God's greatness and celebrate God when everybody else around you was grieving? And Jenna, I'm going to spin this back to you too, because I know you've been through some trial and tribulation in life, and I know that you two can relate to this. So let's just hear your answers for the audience on that one.
Oh, goodness. Survivor's guilt it's real. And I can tell you that it is straight from the enemy, because God pulled you out for a moment, for a reason that we don't see in that period, in that time, but there's a bigger picture. And the enemy's number one goal is to steal, kill, and destroy. And when we have survivor's guilt, it's almost like we feel guilty for being alive when God has called us to be alive. And I know that's hard for when we think about the people who did survive instances where we could have been taken out. But we have to remember that we all have all of our days are numbered. It says that in scripture, that our days are numbered. Survivor's guilt is real, but it's straight from the enemy. And we have to know that God pulled us out for a reason and a purpose. And as long as we keep our eyes on Jesus and the cross, we're going to see in the long run that reason of why we were pulled out of that, and what our purpose is and what our calling is.
So survivor's guilt for me was kind of more of a I felt guilty being happy that I was alive, and I felt guilty when people said, well, there's a reason why you're alive. God's not done with you. And I couldn't help but think about the kids or the families that didn't survive. And to me, that's not fair to be happy, to think, well, maybe are you saying that they aren't, they didn't have a purpose? So that's the thing with being a Christian, you kind of struggle with understanding all these things. But that was the hard part. That's the guilty part for me, to think, okay, I'm happy, but I'm also very sad. I'm very sad, and I'm heartbroken for these families, and I'm heartbroken for the moms who lost their kids. Like, there was a little boy that was in between Coulter and Lena's age. That was probably my lowest point, reading her article with the Texas Monthly. It was just, I put myself in her shoes because we were right there. I mean, it was very easy to, because you just do, well, if I wouldn't have gotten out of this cabin, at this point, then we would stayed in. And then if we would stayed in, then your mind just goes in those places. I feel very, I'm obviously very appreciative that he saved us, and I'm grateful, and I'm going to use this. There's no doubt about that. I already have. Like, my life has changed in a month more than I could ever think. You ask how it emotionally, physically, spiritually. Physically, we weren't touched, like, we came out scar-free. We didn't have a single injury. Emotionally, it was a lot more damage, especially for me. And spiritually, it was the best thing that ever happened to us. So, I mean, it just pulled us out. I'm not saying I was disconnected by any means, but I definitely needed something to kind of wake me up and go, okay, every time I drop my kids off at school and I get there safely and they're healthy, I need to be thankful. And because you can be taken by a flood, and you just kind of wake up a little bit, and you hear about it. Our pastor talks about all the time about, tomorrow's not promised. It's not. And so you have to live today like tomorrow's your last day. And it's so true, until you're put into a situation like this, and that comes with the survivor's guilt, and it's kind of a blessing in a way too. It's kind of being able to live through something like that, and one day we'll be able to tell our kids, you lived through a 1,000-year flood, a traumatic event, and it's just something that is part of our story now. And I kind of want to twist it. I kind of don't want it to be this heavy thing anymore. It always will, because there were so many deaths that are associated with it. Land can be rebuilt, all that can be redone. It's the lives that's the hardest part. But I will say that it has spiritually been a blessing for us. It has really woken me up and made me refocus and reset.
That day that I read your story, read what happened to you, I actually reached out to Tammy. Tammy is Kacey's mother-in-law, who is one of my mother's longtime best friends. I actually worked for Tammy for a little bit at her medical spa, but I actually messaged Tammy and just told Tammy how grateful I was that her children and her grandbabies were okay. And, texting Tammy, I'm still in tears reading in your story, and I couldn't help but hear the Holy Spirit say that this was a big movement and a big shift in y'all's family. Tammy had shared with me that, they have never prayed that hard before in those moments of the unknown. And I fully believe that. As a mother now, I can't imagine having Waylon somewhere that devastating, catastrophic flood just happened and not knowing if he was alive or dead. But in that moment, I know that God was moving on not only your and Reagan's hearts, but all of the Gilberts and all of the Smetanas. And in those moments, there was fire being built. And I know that it was probably crushing, but there was something being built in there that is going to be unshakable from here on out.
Yeah, so I'm going to jump into another question. So, Kacey, you have an incredible testimony. Surviving that is just absolutely incredible. I mean, that takes absolute strength that we don't have as human beings, so it only comes from the good Lord above. So we are very grateful that you survived it and you are here to speak on it on our podcast, on our platform. But if you could take your testimony, the test that you went through in life, and give someone advice that is going through a storm, going through that period of their life where they don't understand what's going on, and they're guilty for surviving, or they're guilty for trauma that they're carrying, what advice would you give to them to help them through that storm that they're going through?
Well, there's always someone who has it worse. You're alive. You're here today because God wants you to be here today. And that's the most important thing that I took out of all this. And I kind of needed everybody else to tell me that. I mean, I knew it, but that viral post, now I try to read all the comments, and most everyone says that, there's a reason why you're here on earth. And that goes to every single person that is breathing today. That means that you're here for a purpose. And I've never really understood that until now. And I hate that something like this had to happen, but it's so true. Don't wait until something traumatic is going to happen for you to wake up, because it will happen. We all go through something at some point, but I will tell you, someone's got it worse, than you. You should thank God every day for every single one of your blessings. And I will tell you, I haven't stopped thanking him. I go to bed thanking him. And I think that's what has, maybe if you are struggling, if you've got survivor's guilt or any type of guilt or struggling with something today, I think it's important to find God and find peace through prayer, and counting every blessing. I mean, just breathing is a blessing. If you've got kids, they are a blessing. If you've got family, friends, I mean, I just think that sometimes God, and you hear that, I just said this earlier, but God puts us in situations sometimes to bring us together and have a community. Like the Hunt, Texas community is better than ever before because they didn't have a choice but to come together, and there's never been more prayer. There's never been more people united. It's just, that's part of a traumatic event, some kind of catastrophic event that is kind of the light in the darkness. And that was the part that I thought was most important to share my story. Was I thought, well, gosh, all we hear is all these negative stories, and I wanted just to bring something positive. Like a lot of people said, oh my gosh, I started to read this and I thought, oh my God, here another family. Thank goodness I kept reading. So I just thought that was a really good, and I had to pray on it, and kind of question what I wanted to do with my story, because I didn't know how I didn't know if I want to be private with it and just hold it in. I didn't know the thoughts, but I think that reaching out to people is so important. Getting a community and people that surround yourself with people that are good and Christian, and get yourself a good church. Like, I love my church and my pastor, and I don't know if he writes these sermons after this July 4th for me, but I feel like every Sunday he's talking to me. He had one a couple weeks ago where he talked about what's in your sandwich, and I thought, well, that's funny. Like, what is he talking about? And he talks about how the sandwich part, like the bread part, is death and kind of life being unfair. Those are things you can't control, but what's in your sandwich you can control. And that is everything in life. You can control who you surround yourself with, who your family is, what your job is, and you need to be happy with it. So yeah, I mean, I'm just soaking it in. I just feel the Holy Spirit just overwhelming in me in the last month. It's just, I'm gonna get emotional because, I mean, you understand, y'all both have been through things, but it's just something that you don't really know until you get filled. And you just appreciate every little thing after something like that happens. And I don't wait for it to happen. You need to, like, my daughter's first birthday, we had a party for, and I couldn't keep it together the whole day. I mean, it was just like a month ago, we couldn't, maybe got that stripped away from us. So it's just, it is just an emotional thing I want to bring as many people to God as I possibly can with my story. Because feeling him in my life and feeling him in my heart is something you really can't understand until you have him in your heart as well. And he just overtakes you. And I'm appreciative of the opportunity to share my story. And I hope that other people do too, if they're struggling with something that they find. There's going to be people out there that are going through it as well.
So, Kacey, earlier in the podcast, you talked about, you were looking for confirmations in the comments for people to tell you that it was okay. So going off of that emotional state that you're at right now, what does it mean for you right now when you hear I'm alive for a reason? What does that mean to you?
And that's the hard part, is that you think, well, I'm alive for a reason, but there's a reason why the other ones aren't, and that's the struggle. And I try to take that part out, and not because I don't believe that their lives are important. I wish I could hug every single one of their moms' necks or their family necks, and I pray for them every day. But moving on with my life and my testimony, it is very apparent that I was saved for a reason, and maybe it's just to share my story, but also maybe because my kids were meant for something. They haven't been alive long enough to be able to live and to be good Christians. And one of the comments was talking about how I needed to, I was saved for a reason, and how I needed to raise my kids in a Christian household and share with them, and then they can share with others, and then they can take, and it's so true. I mean, they haven't had a chance, and now they've been given this chance, and it's just so important to me, to raise Christian babies, and to have them know God. I hope I can do that. My goal is, that's every parent's number one goal, is to bring their kids to God.
Talking about that, being parents and raising children in a Christian household, that is something that I have so much honor in doing, that we get to raise leaders of homes. If we're raising boys, and we are raising, if you have a daughter, you're raising a daughter to, raise her babies up one day, and they are our personal disciples that we get to personally disciple in this life. And if you are a mom or a dad, that role is one of the most important roles you will ever play, is raising your children to know God, to love Jesus, and to have that relationship. So when seasons like this happen, whatever storm it may look like for them, they are equipped to get through it, peace and honor and dignity, because they have the one who gives those things. There is nothing that can compare to the peace of God, that you can literally walk through flood waters and come out with peace because of God. Just like you shared, Kacey, you cannot explain that feeling of being filled with the Holy Spirit and having that in your life. You just can't explain it until they will know it when they are in it. And if that's someone who's listening right now that doesn't know what that feels like, you've just got to invite God in. You've got to allow your heart to be open, to be moved, to believe the unbelievable, to believe the unseen. And once you ask God to do that, to come in and change your heart, you're going to have peace that surpasses everything that seems crazy to the outside world. Kacey just survived a historic flood, a little over a month ago. And she can sit here and tell her story and bring light to the darkness because she is backed by the one who created her. To get through this life alone, we can't do that without God. We can't do that without Jesus in our hearts. Kacey's telling of a storm that talks of flood waters. But whatever your storm looks like, you have to know that there is peace on the other side. There is a calmness to that storm, that you can walk through those waters and come out in peace, come out with boldness to bring light to that darkness. And Kacey, I am so grateful that you came on here and are sharing your story to bring light to others in this darkness. And maybe they did lose a loved one. Maybe they were also survivors of this storm, or maybe they are survivors of other storms. We don't know what their story is, but I hope that everyone listening to this episode is finding peace and clarity and are able to walk the rest of this knowing that there's peace on the other side.
I agree. I mean, it's just it's an emotional thing, because there's just so many parts to this storm. Like you said, there's the sadness and there's the devastation, but there's also like you said, there's like a peace with it, you know. There's I see some of these moms, I don't know how they keep it together talking about their daughters, and it breaks my heart for them. I'm going to stay heartbroken for a long time. I think there's just like a little bit of piece of me that left with this storm. But it was also filled with something that maybe wasn't there before, and that's probably a little bit to do with just my faith and just kind of refocusing. And I love seeing all the people. I mean, you can't have a conversation about this flood without talking about God and getting into conversation about faith. And it's just, isn't that what it's all about? I mean, it's just so important to refocus and just to say, God is with us all, always. And if, you can get through a flood with God just leading you the whole way. And I had some people kind of question that. Most of the comments were very kind and touching, but there were some that questioned that it wasn't God. And I had somebody say, well, why didn't God, if God was wanting to protect them, why didn't they tell her to stay home? Well, that's not how God works. Like, he's not going to stop you from, getting in your car every day. And, you don't think when you get in your car, I'm going to get in an accident. You don't go to the river thinking there's going to be a flood. It's just, we live our lives. And that's part of the sandwich part, is we get to control what's in our sandwich. We get to control what we do daily, and you gotta enjoy it, because you don't know when it's gonna end, and you don't know like when that flood's gonna come. But turn a negative flood into a positive flood. Take the flood, the horrific flood part, and say, I'm now flooded with God and flooded with his love, and I can now change my life. I can tell you everything that we've done since then has been asking God for his guidance and making sure that it's appropriate for him and the right thing to do in our lives. So the why part, I think I questioned, why did God save us? And people said, don't question why, don't question God. And that wasn't necessarily what I was doing. I think that just came with the guilty part. But I'm not innocent at all when it comes. I sin every day, and I'm questioning him is not the right thing to do. It's hard. I have to stop myself from doing it. But I will say, being filled with his love, and now knowing that he loves us so much that he saved me and my family, and he's giving us this chance to live our lives. And I just am honored. And I hope that I can not only just make myself proud and make anyone who's followed our story proud. I hope that someone can look up in a few years and go, wow, they really did. Like, God saved them for a reason. And this is why. And that's my goal. But most importantly is making God proud. Making him go, yep, there it is. There's the reason. We saved her for a reason. And I hope this podcast and sharing my story is one step of that. Because I know sharing it, maybe if it just reaches one person, it will be worth it.
Well, Kacey, your podcast has definitely touched Jen and I, and your story is absolutely incredible. So we're going to have one last deep dive question. And if you can go back to speak to yourself in the middle of that storm, in the moment of panic, fear, silence, guilt, all of it, what would you tell yourself now that you've walked through it? And who has God shown himself to be to you?
Well, I think I would have just told myself God's in control, and I want to say I probably did, but there wasn't enough time to really process all of it. I think it came afterwards that I said, wow, oh my God, like God really just led us. But in the moments, I think I wouldn't have changed a thing. We did everything right. I think one single thing different would have taken our lives. And I actually don't want to change anything. I think that the way we lived through it was how God intended it. And I think now going forward, we can process this all in the best way we possibly can. I think looking back, it's something that will always be very emotional for me. My kids won't ever understand it. And really the only other person would be my husband, and he's built of armor. I asked him one day, so are you sad? Is this like, hurt your heart? And he's like, I'm just moving past it. And I'm like, how are you not feeling these feelings? So, guys are a little bit tougher. And so that's been the hard part. It's kind of feeling like I'm doing it alone until I reached out to everybody and shared my testimony. And that was that turning point. And that, I think, was the best, like I said, the best decision I made, which is allowing other people to feel my feelings, allow people to reach out to me, allow people to relate to me, and then maybe someone else to share their story. I don't really know. I mean, I just hope that if there are other people out there that are struggling with it, if I can relate. Our story ended in happiness, and it's hard to say that because there was a whole lot that wasn't, but I am grateful that God led us the whole way, that every decision was, it was just, it really couldn't have been more perfect. Like, we really, I mean, I went through every step with y'all, but if we would have changed one thing, it would have changed the outcome. I'm still in shock. Like, I sometimes don't even have the words because I don't know. I don't know how to process it all. It's just y'all have both been through things, and Jen, I've heard your story too. It's just like you don't know until you go through something like that. And like when you were pregnant, you probably didn't think you were going to have the birth experience. Like, never would have crossed your mind, you know?
Definitely
So,
not.
but when I go to the river, I didn't think I was going to be in
Yeah.
a historic flood. So, yeah, it's just, you just never know how it's gonna to end up. So, just very emotional.
Yeah, I can't even try to begin to imagine. The biggest thing that I found peace in all of this, and I shared this with my husband when we were actually still in Ruidosa. It was right before we came back. I said, babe, the only thing I find peace in right now is knowing that all of those little girls that lost their life at Camp Mystic, and all the little young children, that they are right now, they are in the arms of Jesus, and they have no recollection of what happened at that night. And that's what we have to hold on to, that if you did lose someone in that storm, or any instance in this life, that you keep your focus on Jesus, and you have that promise that you're going to see him again in heaven. And I have no words. I have no words for any of this, really, other than that you're here sharing your story with us. I can't tell you, Kacey, how, you said earlier that you wanted, to make people proud, and most of all, God proud. And I can promise you, Kacey, that God is proud of you. I know that me and Josh are proud of you. I know without a shadow of a doubt that your amazing mother-in-law, Tammy, is so proud of you. And you have an army of people backing you, rooting for you and your family. And we all know that this is not the end of y'all's testimony, that there's going to be more to come. And I can guarantee you, whether it be in a, couple months or a year down the road, you'll be on another episode telling another story of why God brought you this far and why he pulled you out, because he's not done. He's not done with you. He's not done with your family. And if you're listening right now, he's not done with you either. As long as there is breath in your lungs, he's not done. And there's a purpose and calling on everyone's life. And sometimes it takes a storm. Sometimes it takes a tragedy. Sometimes it takes an illness. But there's a calling, and we can find it before those things happen. Kind of like with me, I didn't find my calling or my purpose or step into that purpose till after I had, lost my eyesight. But there's a purpose and calling on everyone's life, and you're strong, Kacey. You are courageous, and you are so brave, and I cannot tell you how much and how grateful I am for you getting on here today and sharing your story to bring light to this darkness of what happened here in Texas.
Thank you. That means a lot because I don't plan to, go on a ton of podcasts or anything like that. I actually wanted to do it because of y'all's mission, and I love, that what you are doing here, and that it is completely faith-based. Like, that's what I want this to turn into. Yeah, I'm very happy that y'all are able to have me on and listen to my story, and I'm just very proud to tell it. Haven't always been, but I'm turning to that point. Like I said, it's just taken me a little bit of time to process it, and then that realizing I couldn't do it by myself. I had to have God help me through it, and other people, Christians, and not even just people saying kind things. Anytime you are kind and you are praying for somebody, that's the most important thing. So I felt every prayer. I felt the happiness that it gave people. So it was kind of a dual thing. You know, it's nice that I got lots of kindness, but I also was glad that I could give that to other people. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I know that sounds crazy, but I would, knowing that I'd survive, obviously. But I would do it because I know how much it has changed my life. I would not want that for I would want everybody to survive, obviously, but I would do it because of how much my life has changed and maybe other people's lives have changed. And I think that that's what life is about, is you're going to go through something, some trial, tribulation in your life, and how you handle it is our testimony. How we end up, dealing with situations that we're put in, and how we handle the things that are put in front of us. It's not just floods, it's your everyday life. And I think a flood may make your everyday life change. It's these things, like, I'm sure, Jenna, you were the same way. I mean, after everything that you've been going through, you're closer to God more than you were before, and it's those things that just pull you close, and you just get filled with Him. I'm grateful for it. We got a lot of cleaning up to do. And that means physically and spiritually and emotionally. And that's the part that, we still have a lot that is going to be lingering with us for a long time. I mean, we've got cleanup weekends, and every single time that I go down and I touch that water, I have to make peace with it. I have to tell myself, this water's not, at one point it was a danger to me, and it was a danger to my family. But every time I go, I have to tell myself, this water it's going to bring me happiness again, and it's not going to hurt me. And it's the same thing with life. I mean, it's just like thinking that anytime, like you said, get in a car or anything that you do every single day, you can thank God that you get somewhere safe. Or thank Him that you got in the car and you got there. And it's like, it just is overwhelming to think that spiritually, emotionally, physically, the questions you ask, those are the things that you end up being overtaken by, especially the spiritually part. The other stuff you can control and you can try to fix, but the spiritual part's the most important. Putting God first, making Him control your life, and allowing Him to make those decisions when you can't do it yourself.
That is so good, Kacey. Before we hop off here, I have one more question for you, and then I want to close out in a prayer. What is one thing that we can pray for you right now? And it doesn't have to even be connected to the flood whatsoever, but what is one thing that we can be praying for you right now?
Well, I guess like for my emotional well-being, not getting so emotional all the time. It's one of the hardest things I'm not really actually an emotional person. I rarely cry, but after this flood, it feels like I'm just flooding with tears. Like the flood brought like this whole new person, and I think that has a lot to do with all of that. The overwhelming feeling of God just being in me. But I think just me trying to move past like getting past my emotions and kind of getting over it a little bit. And then letting God overtake and guide me to what I need to do next. Share my story, whether I need to continue to volunteer. I want to know what is the best move for me moving forward, and my family too.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know as of yesterday, which right now, recording this, we are a month and 2 days out from this flood. So by the time this podcast releases, we'll be about a month and a half out probably. As of right now, there is still one little girl missing. Her name is Celie, I believe how it's pronounced, Celie. So I just want to pray over Kacey and her family, and also just everyone else going through their own storms, whether it was this flood or another thing. I just want to close out in a prayer. But before I do that, I do want to give a verse to kind of tie all this together. And it just so happens to be one of my favorite verses. But it is Romans 8:28, and it says, "All things good for those who love him." And that is exactly what he is doing right now, Kacey. It's exactly what he is doing right now, that you are bringing the light to this darkness and he is working it for your good because you are pursuing him, because you are putting your trust in him. He's working all this for your good. And so I do just want to thank you again, Kacey, for being here with us and sharing your story and your testimony. Josh, did you want to say one more thing before we close out in prayer?
Yeah, so Kacey, I just want to say thank you for coming on and sharing your story. It was very powerful and impactful. It moved me in a lot of different ways, and I hope it does the same for our audience, just to help them get through those difficult times. Maybe that season of a storm that they're going through. I hope your story really touches someone's life and really brings them back towards God for the source that they need to get through that storm, whether it's emotional, physically, spiritually, financially, whatever storm they're going through. So we appreciate you coming on and telling your story about that. Before we hop off, guys, I just want to do a simple plug for you guys to go and check out our website, www.riseandsea.org. Check us out on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the platforms on podcasts. We're everywhere. So we're going to try and get in your cars, your headphones, your stereos, wherever we can have you guys. We'd love to be in presence with you while we're in the presence of God. Jenna, you want to take us away?
Absolutely. Why every emotion was there, God. I pray that you would keep directing their footsteps. God, if they need to go volunteer, you would open the door. God, if she needs to share her story somewhere else, that you would open the door. God, I pray that it would be without a shadow of a doubt exactly what you want them to do, just like it was that day on July 4th. Lord, I pray for the family that is still looking for their loved one, Celie. God, I pray that by this time that this podcast releases, that her body is found, God, and that her family can give her the burial that she deserves. God, I pray for every family out there who has been affected by this storm. God, that you would bring peace and comfort to them that surpasses all understanding. Lord, I pray that you would be with the ones that are listening right now, God, that you would give them peace right now, wherever they're at, God, that all distractions would be turned off and you would speak peace into their lives, over their minds, over their hearts. God, whatever their storm looks like, whether it be the July 4th flood or something else, God, that you are there, you are working. God, I pray that even when they can't feel you working, that they know that you are there and that you are working for their good. Lord, I thank you again for this day and this opportunity for Kacey to come on and share her testimony. Lord, I pray that you do what only you can do and that you continue to guide and lead, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.
Amen. I thank y'all again for having me and allowing me to share the story. And I'm just so happy that I could do that with y'all's podcast. And I really hope to see y'all grow. I know y'all are just brand new and y'all are going to do big things. I'm very, very proud of y'all. And I wish y'all the best of luck.
Thank you so much, Kacey. Thank you
We
so
definitely
much.
appreciate you, Kacey. It was a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.